Hi, I'm Nat,
And I'm Guy.
and we're back.
We got a new studio. We've been building this over the last few weeks, so hopefully you like it. If not, well, this is what we're working with.
And a lot of things have been happening while we were gone. Unfortunately, luckily, Trump won. We were not really here to really talk about it, but we're going to talk about it today.
Some of the issues we're going to go over to is the Trump election. Sam Harris and Dave Smith get into it. If you're wondering who Sam Harris is, he's a leftist intellectual, and Dave Smith is a libertarian debater and a damn good debater at that. After that, we're going to get into voter inconsistencies. The left seems to be waking up to this from maybe the opposite side. Then we're going to get to just some Trump appointments, and then the cleanup of the U.S. government and the U.S. government leading through example. And finally, Trump brings calm to the world, but not to the elites.
Yes.
Okay, let's get into some leftist meltdowns before.
Well, let's talk about it a little bit. I mean, a lot of people didn't really think that Trump had the chance to get elected, particularly because they had been, blindsided by, well, not blindsided.
That wasn't me. I said I was claiming 50 state landslide for a long time now. It wasn't a 50 state landslide, but I will say this: in all the states that they didn't require voter ID, that means it's illegal for people running these voting booths to ask for ID. That's the main states the Democrats won. If that voter integrity is cleaned up, the next Republican candidate has a good chance of winning close to 50 states, I think.
Mm-hmm. But what I was going to say is that the media had a big role to play, and everybody has been saying it since Trump won, in kind of gaslighting the public into telling them that he had no chance, that Kamala Harris did have a chance. And I think that's why we're seeing so many people melting down, because they're realizing, what I've been hearing for years and years now maybe isn't true. I mean, more than half of the U.S. population can't be, just completely crazy and radical and what they've called them for so long in the media.
Well, it's crazy when you look at the breakdown of how much money she spent. She's now in debt, and Trump made a tweet. I don't know if he was joking or not, but saying he would pay her election debt for you. I think she's in debt for $20 million, and that's not the Democratic Party. They recently passed laws so that the candidate themselves is actually responsible for that money. Also, I was going to say, if you looked at the $1 billion she spent, over $1 billion, most of that was spent on getting people to like her or endorse her, such as Oprah Winfrey, I believe, was paid $1 million. She denied it, and then the records came out. Then you had all the rappers and everybody else, so it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, she denied it, and a lot of people are starting to deny that they ever got paid by the Harris campaign, because what they say is that their production companies got paid. But I mean, regular journalists and regular endorsements usually don't come as, paid favors, especially for interviews, like with the Call Her Daddy interview, where they built this whole giant set for millions of dollars just for her to not have to go to California, be able to stay where she was in DC, and then have this podcast that got almost no views. I mean, comparably to, for example, Joe Rogan and Trump together.
Yeah, well, I was going to hold this for the election integrity part of the program, but maybe we'll get into it a little bit now. Laura Trump is heading the RNC now, and her main strategy was to make sure that there was election integrity, meaning there was going to be no major drop boxes, the mail-in balloting they were going to watch. They had over 10,000 lawyers they hired, and most of those were volunteers. So only 5 to 10% of those lawyers were actually paid. The other 90% were volunteers. If you were a lawyer and willing to volunteer for a day, they took you a week, or if you can do more time. Mm-hmm. And you didn't even have to be an election integrity lawyer. They were going to teach you the election integrity laws. You just had to be a certified lawyer. So a lot of their campaigning was mainly volunteers, and you look at the door knockers as well. When you look at Kamala Harris's campaign, door knockers and these people were paid millions upon millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Trump's campaign was almost all volunteers. Again, he only paid 5 to 10% of the people. And that same thing went for his ad campaign. Most of his ad campaign was actually internet podcast interviews. Now, he did pay for some ad campaigns, but not nearly as much as Kamala Harris. She outspent him by a tremendous amount.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, just seeing the internet's reaction now, what we were talking about, and how people are deciding to voice their distaste for either Trump or anybody who voted for him, started to go a little bit unhinged. And we're seeing it mostly with just women. Women are the ones that are slightly going unhinged.
Well, I was going to say the Minus Touch. This is one of these crazy leftist YouTube channels I watch because I like to keep in touch with like what exactly their pulse is and how they're going to move forward. Are they going to rearrange or what are they going to do? But they had a horrible video the other day talking about Harris supporters are divorcing their husbands. They're no longer talking to family members, that you shouldn't talk to your friends if they voted for Trump. This is absolutely insane.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, there's quite a few different movements, but they all kind of stem from one another. And we're going to see the first one here, which is the Matka, which is one of the responses to Trump winning. And women, leftists mostly, it's essentially deciding to poison their own husbands. So Matka stands for Make Aqua Tofana Great Again. Aqua Tofana was this poison that in some sense, the 17th century, this woman was selling to other women so they could poison their husbands, and it was undetectable, and apparently it actually helped kill a lot of people. Well, I don't know if I believe
all this. I think this was a spoof article.
No, it's not a spoof article. It's from Newsweek. But what I'm saying is
what I'm saying is Newsweek is lying. You're giving
No, what I'm saying is women are, and this is verifiable because you can go and see all the TikToks that they've now had to put down because they're scared that the government's actually going to go after them, because there's women going on TikTok and suggesting to their followers that they should create this concoction and then give it to their husbands or men in general. They don't even mention that they had to have voted for Trump. They're just saying, just give any men in your lives this poison, and encouraging other women to hate on their husbands and their brothers out there.
I would put this in the category of the dogs and the cats. They want to bring attention to you should separate from your friends and family, and they're just using a hyperbolic like statement like poison your husband to do this. I don't think this is actually happening.
But the problem is some people might actually take it seriously.
Some people might, but I don't think they have, and nobody's been arrested.
No, but there's tendencies, but there is also, this movement, the 4B movement.
Okay, let's get into these crazy.
Which is the South Korea. That's what I'm getting into. We're talking about the unhinged women and the response to essentially what they thought could never happen, and the rights are being taken away, which is not true. Mostly when they say women's rights are being taken away, they're talking about abortion, where it's only been going back to the states now. Well, it doesn't mean that your rights are being taken away, and also none of the medical procedures or necessary medical interventions that are now being coined abortion are actually illegal. Those are still completely legal in all states, even with the ones with restrictions. So they've been lying to women for a very long time as a campaign strategy, which clearly didn't work because women are slightly smarter than that, most of them.
Well, you have to be honest. It has been working. That has been their number one issue. The people that did vote for them, a lot of them did vote on that issue. Now, I might disagree with that issue, but this is a perfect opportunity for J.D. Vance and Trump to realize, they won by a lot, but there is this huge group of people that voted against them on the abortion issue. So what they need to do is get into Planned Parenthood, kind of clean it out so they're not promoting just abortion, that they're giving different kind of
reproductive health care
and family assistance to these people that need it, not for abortion, so they can statistically lower the rates of abortion, not by forcing it on people, but by offering services and things like this.
I think the main issue for a lot of people is not with abortion itself, but the fact that it is being used as a contraceptive method instead of the regular ones. People are just getting them over and over again, and the statistics clearly show that women are using it as a contraception plan instead of, last resort, and the fact that RAPE and incest and all those cases
the amount of abortions is what's concerning.
That's what I'm saying.
People aren't just having one abortion;
that's what I'm saying.
They're popping them abortion pills.
Repeat clients keep coming up, but what I was getting to is that the whole 4B movement started in South Korea against.
What's the 4B movement?
So 4Bs, I think B stands for no in Korean. So it's no sex, no marriage, no childbirth, no dating.
Oh, these are the crazy liberals shaving their heads.
Well, this is part of the, women are swearing off any kind of contact with men because apparently men are the only ones that voted or could ever like Trump, even though a lot of women were voting for economic reasons and also to protect their own spaces as women. But yes, these unhinged women are starting to say that they're not going to, look at men, touch men. It doesn't really matter who they voted for, who the men voted for. They're just saying that all men are kind of off the table. And it's gaining traction on social media by these, yes, unhinged liberal women who don't really seem to have a grasp in reality, and who've been coddled for so long and told them, oh, yes, all your feelings are valid. The problem is, I don't think a lot of men, especially the conservative ones that voted for Trump, really care.
Well, this is a much better. This is a much better strategy than what they had. Now, what they had was the tip of the spear was these transgendered issues, which is less than 1% of the population. But when you're trying to target women, that's half the population. So I don't think they're going to get half the population. I still think it's a losing strategy, but it's much better than trying to court transgendered issues. So this is something they can maybe build off of. I don't personally like the strategy or what they're doing. I think it's extremely toxic and nothing good's going to come from it. Mm-hmm. But they're really going to have to wait for Trump to make the mistakes because the ball's in Trump's court. And if he does well, it's going to be hard to run against J.D. Vance.
Yeah, and also speaking of, and I mean, I'm not really going to play a lot of the unhingedness, but I mean, here's just one example of someone crying just because Trump won, if it wants to play. Doesn't want to play. Okay, well, if you scroll through to X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, there's just put leftist meltdown, and they're all there crying, screaming unhingedly. And yes, one of the things that they have been doing is shaving their heads. And now, funnily enough, the cancer survivors and alopecia sufferers, all of these women are coming out and saying, the fact that you're making yourself uglier because you don't want anybody to date you by shaving your head is actually dehumanizing and demeaning to me because I didn't have a choice in shaving my head, and now you're calling me and every other woman who suffers with some illness or some issue ugly. So it's kind of backfiring on them and their whole little feelings.
Well, I don't know.
They're just hurting everybody else's feelings.
I'll admit I indulged in watching these leftists meltdown for about a day, but then I kind of stopped. Like, they're going overboard with just rubbing it in. Honestly, I've been watching a ton of leftist media lately. I'm very interested on how the left is going to reconfigure because they're going to have to give up these radicalist policies if they want to survive. But the women on the left do not want to give up these radical policies. They're completely brainwashed. But the men on the left side, you're really seeing them, it's starting to sink in.
Yeah.
And they're going to need new policies. They're going to have to reformat. A good reformatting would be Bernie Sanders. The issue is he sold out now. Nobody trusts Bernie Sanders, but they're going to have somebody that can take those style populist leftist policies and try to bring them to the forefront if they want to compete with the Republican Party.
Before we get into that, one last thing I wanted to say is that one woman that also is a little bit angry at Kamala because she lost is Jill Biden, who decided not to greet her during, I think it was today or yesterday.
What happened?
They had a meeting, Jill Biden and Vice President Kamala. They had some sort of event. Hold on. They were in an event for, I believe it's the fallen soldiers. And they did not, Arlington Cemetery. So they did not look at each other. She did not want to greet her. She did not extend her hand. So I think, and we saw her wearing all red, of course, but to go to vote, Jill Biden, I mean. But we're going to see, as you mentioned, a lot of kind of leftists and Democrats reckon with their decisions. Now we can go into the leftist men if you want.
Oh, okay. Well,
the reconfiguration of political strategies.
Well, I would say, Sam Harris is a leftist thought leader on the left-hand side, and he put out something, and I listened to his whole podcast. It's online if you want to listen to it. In the first 5 minutes, I'd say, whoa, wow, this guy is really coming back to normalcy, because if you know Sam Harris, he has had TDS worse than anybody, and he used to be an intellectual. Now he just looks like a fool. But the first 5 minutes, I thought he was coming back to reality, and then he went off the deep end. Like, oh my God, name calling of not only Trump, but Elon Musk and everybody else in this new administration. It was just insane. He was calling out Dave Smith. I listened to Dave Smith's response. Now he's like a debate bro on the left, a libertarian. He's a very good debater, and Sam Harris can call him names, but he doesn't want to call out anything on the issue because he knows Dave Smith will absolutely dismantle him.
And Sam Harris kind of came up, I mean, he was already kind of famous, but he came up with the whole Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, that whole group of intellectuals. What were they called? It's been so long.
Was
and
it the
then they
Four
all-
Horsemen or?
No, I mean, that was one of them, but then that's what I'm trying to look up because I even forgot. I used to kind of
Because-
follow this closely, but he fell so off, he went insane during the Trump years.
They
and
used
I
to have
just
these
kind of-
debates about God. 2 of them were atheists, and I think a couple of them were not atheists.
Yeah,
Is that
but
how?
they just used to like also gather together and
Yeah, but they
go
had
on
to-
each other's
they-
podcasts and stuff, and they've completely alienated everybody kind of out of the group. A lot of them are still friends. I mean, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, Brett Weinstein, and his brother. But Sam Harris was in that little group, and
Yeah.
then he went a little deranged, especially on the trigonometry
but
podcast. I think that's the one where most people kind of realized that he was off.
The issue
hinges a
was
little bit.
people knew he had
Trump deranged.
people knew he had TDS.
Yes.
So they started inviting him on the podcast and
it was
asking
funny.
questions about Trump because it was highly clippable moments.
Yes.
And it just made a very intelligent man look very, 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 very foolish. So
And I think that's because that was a very good example of what happened to a lot of people, not just him, but he was used kind of as the puppet to exemplify what happens when you have TDS. And that's why he got invited and talked about for so long when he came out as this deranged, unhinged person, because that's what happened to a lot of very smart intellectuals and, people on the left, not even maybe Democrats, but just progressives. It just got progressively more unhinged with the Trump derangement syndrome and
Well,
what they were saying.
Sam Harris has this NPR voice where he talks like this. Welcome to NPR. And he thinks if he talks like this, he can hypnotize you and sound intellectual. But honestly, Dave Smith just talks normal, like a normal person, and he dismantles every argument with thought and fact. And he doesn't try to come off as an intellectual. He comes off as a common guy, and he does it very well. And he directly said to Sam Harris, you can call me a fool, whatever you want, but you don't want to actually debate the facts. And if you ever do, there's an open invitation. You can pick any subject you want. And Sam Harris just will not do it.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe let's go into these voter inconsistencies that have been kind of being highlighted by the left.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're asking where these 15 or 20 million votes went. It ended up being around 10 million, I think,
The
at the
ones
end
that
of the day.
Kamala lost, but that Joe Biden had won last time.
Yeah.
Because he got 80 something.
He was the most popular
80 million
president in
in
history
history.
ever. That's Joe
According
Biden.
to the popular
and
votes of last elections.
he was already losing his mind when he got the 84 million, and people are saying, oh, it's because he voted against Trump. Well, I think the better argument was it was COVID. They had the mail-in balloting, and that's what I said before the election. But behind closed doors, I had always thought the election was stolen, and it was done through
I think we still can't say that on YouTube.
and it was
but
done through drop boxes and
was
things like this. The 10 million votes, and the reason they have so few votes this time was because of what they did last time.
Yeah,
and they
because-
screwed themselves over last time because they did that.
because not that many people were, almost forced to vote. They didn't get the ballot in the mail. They didn't get someone to go retrieve it for them and then go post it. So I think a lot of those votes were lost because those were people that wouldn't have usually voted, but kind of got coaxed and almost forced into voting just by the way the system was working back during COVID.
Well, that absolutely screwed them because they thought they won the election by so much. And so they leaned even harder into these far left policies. And they went even further off the deep end. And the backlash was shown in this election. So, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think
Because Trump got the same amount of votes
almost the
every
same
single
amount of votes.
time. So 2016, he had almost the same amount of votes as the next election, and this election in
latest one.
2024, he got slightly more, but it's not changing. He's very popular president,
Yeah.
and obviously not as popular as Joe Biden, but
And I mean, I think just in general on his victory, I mean, being here now in Mexico and I mean, seeing where things are headed here, it feels like all the other victories, almost like Milei and then Bukele and then all of these figures that are rising up because people are fed up and starting to see the light. But it's still a long ways to go. And coming from Canada, I mean, I'm Mexican, but we
Yeah,
come
but
from Canada. Seeing this victory, I think, is a very good indication of not perfect things to come, but at least some semblance of normalcy coming back to Canada, maybe 2025, if they decide to call it damn election or take him out.
well,
Just
Trump's going to
everybody
lay
taking
down
out.
major cover fire for all these conservative populist types that are coming up, like Malay and Bukele and all of the people in Europe, such as Viktor Orban. He's going to use
And
his
Giorgia Meloni.
and Georgia Maloney.
That one was a
He's going to renegotiate trade deals with these countries and put pressure on NATO and put pressure on the allies and the enemies, and it's going to really help these populists come up. So it's finally
Yes,
going
and
to it's going to finally lay some cover fire, because NATO and these globalists, it was so hard to come up and win elections as an independent and trying to stand up for the people.
And it's a different kind of populism. It's not the scary populism that a lot of people talk about, especially in Latin America. I think it's a new redefinition of the term that's being used as populism. And also another great indicator is that RFK Jr. also kind of won when Trump won, and he's being brought into the administration, and just seeing, I mean, you've talked about the health issues in Canada and the food and how it tastes different and everything they put into it.
Well, that's
I think
gonna
it's
go
a great indication as well for what could happen in other countries that might start to focus more on health and less on just profit after profit after profit and putting
Well, I hope they do with
poison into food.
these GMOs and the way they're treating water and everything else. I mean, one of the RFK's big things is he wants to take the fluoride out of the water, and I really hope he does. The left is absolutely going crazy about this. And it's like, if you look at the history of why fluoride is actually in the water, it's not to help you with your dental and your teeth, as they say. It was a byproduct of industrialization, and they needed to dump it somewhere. So they decided to pass laws to say it was healthy for the people, and they dumped it in the water. It's craziness.
And I mean, more and more stuff like that is going to keep coming out
Well-
during the next, I think, couple months, and then during the administration. But so much backlash is also, I think, going to come on. CNN might be losing and having to fire some people or like lower their salaries. But I still think that the mainstream media now is going to go back to 2016 and have even more viewership, because they're going to be trying to, dunk on Trump. So I think it's gonna, even though a lot of people say it's going towards podcasts and towards online and towards YouTube, I think this might help them kind of hang on even for a little bit longer. I don't think that's a good thing.
I disagree with
but
you. I think people are fed up
fed up,
with
but
them
they're still gonna keep
ducking
trying.
on Trump, and I don't think they're going to tune in for that.
Well, the
And
deranged people we see online might.
So that's what you
Mostly
think, and
white
we'll see what
liberal
happens.
women.
Because what I think is
White
going to happen
liberal
is the right's going to come in, and these television companies such as CNN, MSNBC are going to be incredibly undervalued right now because they don't have any viewership. So they're going to be up for sale for
And
very,
someone's gonna
very
come
cheap.
scoop them
So
up. It's
right-wing
going to be
businessmen are going to come
Elon.
in.
Yes.
Wait, oh, are you making fun of me?
Well, no, I'm saying like it's going to be Elon that's going to
We can
come
go to the
and
war room
save.
if you want.
It's going to come save all of these networks. But I think they're not going to give up so easily. And I think that's the biggest mistake. And as you've been talking about, seeing commentators from the left kind of realizing their own mistakes, I think a lot of them won't, unfortunately.
We'll see what
And the
happens.
division's going to keep
But
being there.
Trump is following through on his promises, like with RFK and the appointments he's making.
Yes.
He's not even in office yet, and you can just see the world is starting to flip.
Yes.
The crazy liberals are trying to back down on their policies, save their own asses, get ready to hunker down. But he is starting to make appointments right now.
Yeah.
And from a broad overview, without going into names and details, he's trying to get loyalists and people that want to reform the government. He wants to get the corruption out of government. So he's put in a lot of people that wouldn't typically be put in these positions.
And then some that have, and some that have been there and did a good job. And I mean, like the ICE person, Rob Horman.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say that.
But and Trump doesn't really hold grudges, which a lot of people seem to think he does, but he completely doesn't. And he's willing to forgive and forget, much like he did Hillary. But with Marco Rubio was a never Trumper. J.D. Vance was a never Trumper.
Yeah.
These people are looking to play big parts in his new administration now because they've become MAGA loyalists.
Yes. So it's good. I mean, it does feel like a sigh of relief for, I think, the whole world. And we're seeing, I mean, terrorist group Hamas backing down, and then Putin and like the whole Ukraine thing kind of also slowly retracting. The Saudi Arabian leaders saying that they don't want the Hamas leaders in Dubai, stuff like that. We're seeing
not just that,
a worldwide reaction, and then Mexico kind of
well,
tightening
and
up
then
a
just
little bit.
the business
the
community
border.
as well,
Yeah.
the stock market, everything is just
Bitcoin went
flipping.
crazy.
I remember when we lived in Canada, every day I would wake up, turn on the news, and it was like bad news after bad news after bad news. Oh, this is going to hurt the
It's
future.
still a little bit like that
Now,
over there.
I've been waking up the last few days and I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah.
This guy, he's not even in office yet, and he's starting to reform everything, which is a fantastic thing.
And I think it just shows how kind of badly and complacent the still current government was with all of the issues that they were trying to solve.
Yeah.
Which is what happens with the left and progressives. They can never really solve anything. They just sit and complain and make things worse.
And that's about it for today's episode. But this is our last English.
It might be our last. We're transitioning. I can't find a better word other than transitioning. So we've opened because this channel has kind of grown a lot since we got to Mexico, and the Spanish videos, thank you so much. They're doing great, and a lot of people seem really interested in having this content in Spanish. We've decided to kind of split up the English and the Spanish channel. So if you're interested in seeing content in English, seeing us live in English, seeing Guy do his show live during the morning time, then we have a new Nat and the Guy in English channel where it's going to be mainly dedicated to all content in English and replicating both sides, like both in this channel and in the English channel. We're going to be
basically we're going to have an English channel, and this is going to be the Spanish channel, so no more exclusive English content on this, hopefully, for the most part. My content in English, I'm going to translate through AI, hopefully, and post on the Spanish channel.
And eventually learn Spanish.
And eventually learn Spanish. So, but if you are a Spanish speaker and you do like my content, which nobody really does, but
yeah, they do.
They're tuning in for mainly you.
No.
But yeah.
Well, because I speak Spanish, but we did have followers back in Canada that were able to find us somehow. So if you're interested, you can stay subscribed to this one, but I'll leave the link in this show, and then the link is also on the notes for this channel, and we'll just keep promoting it through Instagram, Twitter, etc. So, and if you speak Spanish and like in English content, then also go over there.
Okay.
We might do a few more shows here while we finish the setup of the English channel, but
yeah, we're still finishing
you'll keep
the studio.
seeing us. Yeah. And for Spanish speakers, I will be starting to do some lives in Spanish as well, so that'll be interesting.
And adios.